Hi, everybody, and welcome to the most recent in our series, Let Me Introduce You. I'm Marion Roach Smith, and you're with the Memoir Project now. We're going to be together for about 60 minutes, and we're going to talk op-eds, my personal favorite piece of a writer's writing life. One of the things that writers misunderstand all the time is that if you keep writing that one big book you're writing, that just begins with your great grandfather and ends with what you had for lunch today. First of all, you're never going to finish it. And second of all, no one's ever going to read it. What we want you to do, as you know, here at the Memoir Project, is get your work out into the world. And you need to learn to diversify if you're going to do that. You need to learn to write the personal essay, the op-ed, and the book length piece, the blog post. Why? Because you're going to be working on that book, but you've got to get your name out there. You've got to make that extension into the world and say, hey, world, I'm writing this book. Are you interested? And so the op-ed is one of the single greatest ways to do that. 2 of my 4 books came out of shorter pieces that I had written that attracted the attention of agents and editors, and I got book offers from them. So we're going to talk a lot about that today, what the op-ed is and what it can do for you. But I like to put that roof over your head first, because you might still be saying, why would I write an op-ed? You would write an op-ed so that you can have a writing life. It's one of the many tools you want to have in your toolbox as you proceed into the world to get that first of what I hope is many book-length memoirs written and published. So I'm joined today and by my co-teacher in the op-ed class that we teach here at the Memoir Project. Just kind of waiting for everybody to show up. But first, let me do a little bit of housekeeping. If you would please find the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel and tell me if you can see the screen. You're not going to see us. See the screen and hear my voice. So we've got the microphone is working here. Mandy says she can see and hear. Becky says yes, all good with Sharon. Ileani says yes, great. We got Catherine says she can't hear, which means she can't hear me right now. All right, but most people can hear. Fabulous. As I said, we'll be together for 60 minutes. We're going to give you a presentation that's live, and then we're going to take your questions, because you should have lots of them when it comes to how you get your voice out into the world. This being one of the best ways I know. So let me see if I can get these slides to move. You know, the technology is what it is. Look at that. Slides are moving. All right, so you can sit back and relax. Everybody who's here and everybody who registered will receive a recording of this class. It'll be delivered to you 24 hours after we get off the live class. So that would be 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time tomorrow, or your time zone equivalent. But let me introduce us. I'm Marion Roach Smith. I'm the author of 4 books, former writer at the New York Times, former a lot of things, but most importantly, the current owner and operator and teacher at one of the teachers at the Memoir Project, and where we teach pretty much everything. And I'm going to introduce Rex Smith at this point. He currently, these days, he writes a weekly column, the Upstate American, on Substack. And we're going to talk about what Substack is in a while, because it is a fabulous new platform for getting your voice out in the world. But he's a graduate of the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism. He's the former longtime editor of the Times Union of Albany, New York. He's the current host of a nationally syndicated public radio show called The Media Project. And he has written, more to the point, hundreds of editorials and op-eds. And he now teaches how to write the op-ed for the Memoir Project. And he's my husband.
Yeah. I wondered if we were going to get to that part.
I do. I own up to that. I do. I own up to that. So
I appreciate
that. So it's an important detail.
Yeah.
You know, so we get to work together, which is really fun these days. So hi, Rex. How are you?
Well, I'm good so far. You know, the day is young. We'll see how it goes, but doing fine. Thanks.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk you through what an op-ed is and why you should write one and all of those good things. And as I said before, leave time for your questions. It's really important to us that you consider this beautiful form of writing as one of the things that you need in your toolbox. So what exactly is an op-ed, Rex? And we have some words here on the screen, but maybe you can just elaborate for us.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this, because I too love op-eds, and I have seen so many of them over the years that have been so effective, including a number that have been produced by some of the students of the Memoir Project who have gone through our op-ed course, and then whom I've had a chance to work with individually. But I also edited a lot of terrific ones during my career. I was the editor of 3 newspapers. I wrote op-eds many times for larger papers, wrote editorials, and now what I write for Substack is really an op-ed, because the term I wanted to emphasize is not limited to something that appears on a page in a newspaper. An op-ed really is an essay in which you are presenting an argument. It needs to be written from your perspective, your area of expertise, and you have a number of areas of expertise, of course, based upon your life experience, based upon your work, your family life, your education, even just what you do with your time, how you spend your free time. Those become areas of expertise from which, with the right exercise, with the right level of work, you can produce op-eds. Now, newspapers are what we think of. We think of the websites, we think of newspapers, whether they're websites or their print versions, as being where op-eds live, and that's partly true. At most newspapers, they will offer you guidelines on their websites of the length of the pieces they publish, generally 600 to 800 words. And in those words, you're not just offering your opinion. And this is a key point that I'll come back to during our time here. You need to marshal facts to support your opinions. Otherwise, you can just call in to talk radio and blather. Everybody else there does. So for this, however, you need to have substance, and that's where reporting comes in, or you might say research if you're not a journalist by training. At better newspapers, there is going to be an editor who will help you out some, help you shape your piece once you've submitted it. There is less of that nowadays as newspapers have continued to cut back staffing, the result of the financial peril confronting legacy journalism in the internet age. But every editor who gets your pieces expects to have clean copy, adherence to its length guidelines and the style guidelines of the newspaper. You want to be sure that what you write is timely, that you follow a news event, or you coincide with an idea that's prevalent. And we can talk a little bit about how you get about doing that.
So that's really helpful. And I think that one of the things that people forget all the time is that everyone can write op-eds. So you don't have to be a former Joint Chief of Staff. You don't have to be a former anything. You can be someone who breathes the air. You can be somebody who put a kid on a school bus this morning and worried about that child's safety. You can be somebody who, like us, stands in a stream as much as possible, fly fishing, and who had grave concerns a few years ago when we lost the environmental protections of our streams, and who in the last 6 years has watched the streams go from dirty to clean again. You can be somebody who has just come from the cardiologist. You can be somebody who adopted a dog in COVID because you wanted a dog always, but one of those COVID dogs. And now you're watching lots of well, we went to a shelter recently, you and I, to donate a cage, and they told us they were full again. People are giving back those dogs. This idea of area of expertise is fundamental to everything we do at the Memoir Project, because I always tell people not to be writing autobiography, that one big book that has everything in it, but instead to write from one area of your expertise at a time. And you have many of them. So this is for everyone, literally. If you just bought your kid their first pair of school shoes in September, for next September, there's an op-ed for you to publish about that difficult moment when you first start to let your kid walk out of your life.
I think that's an important point also. You just touched on this notion of quickly following a news event, as this slide says. That is, you may write something now that will be ready to publish when a news event happens.
Right.
If, for example, you care about the prevalence of guns in our society and there's a school shooting, you may not be able to write the piece that you want fast enough to get that into an editor's hands so that it's timely, but sadly there will be another one,
Right.
So have your piece ready that you're able to offer to an editor or a producer on the radio as soon as you can after there's a news event that is lively.
Right, because there's always a news pig.
Yeah.
And we're going to take lots and lots of questions, and I suspect a lot of this will come up. But it's a beautiful thing to keep in mind that there's a cyclical calendar. There's a regular old calendar that works every single year. And right now we're not looking to read pieces on Thanksgiving, but you could get your Thanksgiving piece ready. And this year, get it in on time so that it runs, and you don't just smack your head again and say, damn it, it's Thanksgiving again. And I kept meaning to write that piece.
Yeah.
I use the big old fashioned paper desk calendar to map out my op-ed ideas. So everybody else can do the same, but we'll talk more about that. So where do they appear? Because they don't just appear in newspapers anymore.
Right. The notion of the term op-ed really arose because newspapers wanted to have material from their readers. They thought there was both an intrinsic value to that, but also it's good marketing to let your readers' voices be heard.
Right.
And they wanted to diversify the viewpoints. So op-ed actually means opposite editorial. It is the page that sits opposite the editorial page. That's where the term developed. Now we tend to think of an op-ed as being just an opinion piece.
Mm-hmm.
They appear in newspapers, yes, both in print and digitally. Most newspapers are peripherally print these days. They are really fundamentally digital local news operations. So your local newspaper will produce an opinion section on their website, which is great for you, by the way, because that makes it easier to share. Think of how much easier it is now to have digital content that you can spread around to other people. Public radio stations in your community are really great, often, many of them are, about presenting local opinions, local writers' opinions. Now, maybe some of our listeners know Marion used to be featured regularly on public radio's All Things Considered, which no longer really does, I guess, essays. But
public radio, local public radio stations do absolutely live by them.
And that's a great place to go. Usually they want 2 to 4 minutes. Again, check their websites to see what they say about the length. And you're going to want to, if you do write for public radio, you'll want to practice reading it, use the timer in the recording device on your smartphone, and that will do the job for you. There also are just such a huge range of digital opinion places, digital sites, I mean, where you can place opinion pieces that have specialized audiences who may be particularly receptive to what you're writing about. Don't overlook the opportunity to be published in a really interesting digital space, because those, again, reach so many people all across the world that that you wouldn't think of reaching through a newspaper. Think about this. A very successful newspaper, say the Cleveland Plain Dealer, the Chicago Tribune, the Houston Chronicle, those reach a few 100,000 people a day, whereas a digital piece can reach millions of people, even if it's a specialized site. So don't overlook the opportunity to write for the digital.
Yeah, the rule of thumb is to go where the eyeballs are. And these days, those eyeballs are online. So there's a bit of a history of the op-ed. You touched on some of it. You touched on how the name comes from opposite or facing the editorial page. But, just go over a little bit so that people get that context, if you would.
I think it's important for people to understand that newspapers are interested in your point of view, even especially if it differs from what the editorial page says. And they really value what you have to say based upon your personal expertise, your experience, what you've gone through. The editors there don't have that. The authenticity of your voice lends real credibility and lends some spice to those pages. And so that the pages are not just filled with the meanderings of the particular people who are charged with writing opinion pieces in the newspaper, but they have the actual voices of citizens. Those pages are different from the news pages. The front page of the paper is news coverage. You have a chance to offer your views on the social, political, and the community affairs in your community based upon, again, your expertise and what's going on.
So why should we do this? I mean, I think that a lot of people, we're nudging them past that idea that it's just for former Joint Chiefs of Staff. But I've got some very strong opinions about what the op-ed can do. But why don't you kind of go over, if you could, why people should do it? And I'll chime in about what I've seen with my students.
Well, I think that it offers you an opportunity to make a difference in your community. And I think we all have an opportunity to be about that, to share your point of view with readers in print or online or with radio listeners. Again, as Marion was saying, you may want to write about your personal experience related to a big issue in the news. If I were to write about our experience fly fishing, it would have to do with the importance of protecting our waters in America from the runoff. In this season of the year, for example, you might talk about the use of salt on roads to clear the roads from ice and snow, which is really increasing the load of ingredients in the water, nutrients in the water, and that is causing pollution. It is killing the aquatic life in our streams. And so as a fly fisherman, I would look at the salt on the road, for example, based upon my experience as a driver, and I would do some research on alternatives to road salt. There are places that are doing a lot less salt use. There are experiments going on that are trying to see if we can keep the roads safe without having to salt them so much to keep our streams cleaner. So I go into this to give you an example of how your personal experience fishing, your personal experience of driving can generate an opportunity for you to write about something that could be of value in helping to save the waterways that we care about. So you can do that. You also have an opportunity on an op-ed to counterbalance something that you've read on the opinion pages, whether it be somebody else's op-ed or an editorial that an editor has written. Surprisingly to many readers, editors love to get something that disagrees with them because it shows that newspapers are responsive to their readers. It shows that they are not closed-minded, and it also enhances readership. People love kind of that little joy of seeing somebody, seeing an editor hoisted on the petard there.
Hoisted.
Having been petarded myself, yes. So your voice can really galvanize others to action, and that makes it a really good thing to do. So I think you should do that beyond just the career benefit that, as Marion pointed out, it presents to you if you're a writer to get your voice out there, to get yourself heard.
So and Rex touched on something I think that's important, that there is a little bit of reporting no matter what the op-ed. So for instance, I was the caregiver to my mother who was an Alzheimer's patient. She was sick for 15 years with that damn illness. And I wrote extensively. I've written op-eds, I've written personal essays, I've written a book, I've written the foreword of other books. I've done a bunch of work on it, but within the topic of Alzheimer's. But if I were to write a piece today, it's 40 years this month that I first wrote about Alzheimer's disease. Even I can't believe I was so young when I first wrote it. Must have been 12.
But think of how much progress there has been made.
And sadly, I might write that piece about how much progress has not been made toward a cure. But my point is, if I was going to write a piece that went back into my experience with Alzheimer's disease, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a politician, I'm not a policymaker, I'm the daughter of a patient. But I would go to the Alzheimer's Association website. I would check my facts. There are now 6.5 million people in the country that have it. The statistic we used to use is that every patient has 4 people attached to them. So that's 6.5 million people, and then 4 times 4 who have some direct experience. I would just get my facts right. It doesn't mean that you have to get every single bit of knowledge about the amyloid plaque and the acetylcholine transfer in the brain and all that. That's not where you're writing from. You're writing as a parent or a child or a spouse of someone with an illness. And so you're going to do a little bit of reporting, but that should not put you off. You want to get your facts right, and it allows you to have some authority when you do that. But never forget, you're writing from your point of view. You're writing from your sensitive, intelligent, aware point of view that we have a problem, and that your small story is illuminating a large national or international issue. It's the old adage that if you want to make anyone understand a budget, put a face on it. So put a face on the problem, yours, and you'll get some real attention. So that gets to this second question that Rex just brought up, is what can an op-ed do for your writing career? And we've had so many students here from the Memoir Project who take our op-ed class that we teach now monthly, get national attention. We had a student who wrote about the frontline workers during COVID and ended up getting a call from the Biden administration asking her to be part of a conversation about what we weren't doing. She runs these amazing workshops, writing workshops for people who are frontline healthcare providers. And I have a student who once wrote a piece. She was the 24-year-old nurse on duty when Ronald Reagan was shot. It doesn't seem possible that there was a 24-year-old nurse who became his private duty nurse for the duration of his hospitalization. And on the 30th anniversary of the shooting, she wrote an op-ed that, because she was taking my class, I was teaching in person then, she took my class, she wrote the piece, it appeared in the paper that Rex used to edit, not from a connection from me, but because it was a damn good piece. But it went out on the New York Times Newswire. It ran in 500 newspapers that day when it was published. She has since published 3 books. So my point is that this wonderful, small, essay-like piece has a dynamism that you cannot overstate. It can get the attention of the president's office. It can get the attention of those people who aren't doing their jobs. My Alzheimer's writing got national attention instantly because I was the first person to write in the popular press about Alzheimer's disease. I ended up on the Today Show after my first piece came out on Alzheimer's disease.
4 times, by the way.
4 times subsequently, 4 times. Yeah. But you can get some attention on something you care about. And one of the things you care about is the memoir you're writing. And this includes that. Because if you've been studying with me, you know that every memoir comes from an argument. And all that argument has to be is what you know after what you've been through. That dogs do things for people that people cannot do for themselves. That's the argument of the book you're writing, maybe, based on the 12 dogs that you've had in your life. And now you're going to write an op-ed from that most recent dog that you adopted during COVID. And at the end of that wonderful op-ed that you publish in your local or national newspaper, it's going to say, Marion Roach is at work on a memoir on the relationship with her dogs. Now, agents and editors are scanning the newspapers all the time looking for that kind of copy. 3 of my students recently got contacted after publishing a piece that said something just like that to check. How's that going, right? Have you got an agent? Have you got an editor? I've had 3 clients that have published the Modern Love column recently, all of whom got outreach from agents and editors after it was published. So what can it do for your writing career? Everything. In that toolbox that you have, along with that book you're writing, you want to first get an agent and or an editor. So an op-ed now that speaks about your argument of your book that you're currently working on could get you a book deal now so that that book is funded. In the run-up to publishing that book, you want to write personal essays, commentary, also from your argument to promote the fact that the book is coming out. After the book is out, you want that tagline to read, Marion Roach's new book, entitled whatever, is just out, right? So this is an amazing way to get countless numbers of eyeballs directed to you. So it's a powerful, powerful way to change the world, I happen to know, bring attention to Alzheimer's disease, bring attention to the streams, bring attention to the dogs that need to be adopted, but it's also fabulous for your career. I've said a million times, 2 of my 4 books came out of shorter pieces I wrote. The little book, The Memoir Project, which many of you have read, came from a blog post I wrote. So I'm a huge believer in going small first and then expanding it. What do you think?
I should also add that you can have a satisfying writing life on the side as part of your life when you're engaged in entirely other opportunities. We have, at the paper that I recently left the editorship of, we have 3 local columnists. All of them are engaged in other careers. Well, they're more than 3, but there are 3 on the op-ed page who write regularly, who are well known in our community now, because they started in exactly this way, doing an op-ed for the Times Union, which led to another, which led to another, and they now are actually viewed as local writers, notwithstanding their other careers that fund their grocery purchases, but the writing is a part of their lives, and it gives you an opportunity to be a writer, even if that's not what you do professionally to support yourself, to provide your health insurance. It's a great thing to do, even if you're not working on a book, an op-ed, or it can become a series of op-eds, can become something that you do along the side all the time.
Right, who doesn't want to be a newspaper columnist? But you don't have to be a weekly newspaper columnist.
Right.
I bet you've forgotten that one of those most long-standing of those columnists came out of one of my classes.
I think they all three did.
Oh, there you go. And it wasn't nepotism. They were all
No,
really,
they were
really
all-
good.
yeah.
By the time they got this op-ed thing down, they were really, really good at what they do. So we offer at the Memoir Project, we teach a class in how to write the op-ed, obviously. And what I want to talk about in a minute is I want to talk about what Rex does in terms of what he does in terms of this class and editing op-eds. But I've put up in the chat box for those of you interested in taking a class on how to write the op-ed, the URL for the class, because we teach them. But these days we also have a new service, which is to edit your op-eds. So Rex is editing them. We also now have on board 5 full-time editors available to us who can edit pieces. Rex's expertise is, well, it's invaluable. So you edit, the way we do it is you edit the piece, they send you a first draft, you get on the phone, you talk about it, you shape the piece.
Well, actually, it would be good. Of course, before I will work with someone, I want them to have taken the course.
Yes, you got to take
so
the
that's
class
the
first, sorry.
prerequisite. Just like any 101 level in college,
Right.
you need the prerequisite. But I like to have an opportunity to chat with a person before you start writing. That's usually very helpful.
Yep.
And then the person can write and submit a piece. I will look at it, give it an edit, and submit back a version to them. And that then I can't give you great guidance on where to publish it. I can give you some. That is, I'm not going to be able to say, oh, this piece, send this to so-and-so, who's the opinion pages editor of the LA Times. That could happen, but it's more likely that I'll say to you, this belongs in your local newspaper, or this belongs at such and such a regional publication, a magazine, for example. This offer this to the digital site Texas Tribune, offer this to Vermont Digger, whatever it might be where you live. There are opportunities for publication beyond your local newspaper. And then, of course, Marion is really good about promoting your work when you publish. Her social media skills are significant, and so it does actually help you a lot. So we're happy to engage in these services, either with me helping you with editing, or pushing it out to one of the other editors who work with the Memoir Project.
Yeah, I think just to clarify, we can't guarantee publication, but
Right.
what we can do is absolutely, we're both quite skilled at saying, this is an online piece, this would probably best off as a blog post, this is probably a national piece, and we've certainly helped with people that have ended up publishing nationally. And this is where that piece should go. We're not going to give you names and phone numbers of people. You've got to do some of that research yourself. But Rex is great at knowing where and how it should be published. So one of the things I want to do before we take questions is I got an email from Molly Phelps today. Molly is somebody I met when she wrote to the Memoir Project, an email just saying she was an ER doctor, longtime ER doctor in San Francisco, and she was about to walk out of her job because of the doctor burnout problem. And she has enormous credentials. She wanted to write a book on the doctor burnout crisis, about what it's like to have lived through it and have made a decision to leave medicine. And she ended up writing a commentary that was recently published in the San Francisco Chronicle. And it's a great piece of work. And as she wrote in this morning, as an editor, Rex reminded me of a top-notch plastic surgeon. There you go, Rex, you're a plastic surgeon. I love that. His work is impeccable and subtle, with an end result that felt polished and true to my voice.
That's so nice.
Isn't
I
that
literally
lovely?
had not seen this.
I know, I didn't show you. I knew if you saw it, you wouldn't let me put it up there.
Oh.
So a shout out to Molly for sending that
Thank you.
in, but
Thank
I'm
you.
so proud of Molly. She's written an astonishing, breathtaking
It was
book.
a fine piece.
And the piece is a fine piece of work.
Yeah.
So it's written from her area of expertise, not just of being a doctor, but of doctor burnout. And that's the point, is what have you got? So for those of you who want to write in for more, you can always contact us at support@marionroachsmith.com. But now I really want to take your questions and see what it is you've got. We're going to take them in the chat box, in the questions box. And it's important for you to find that questions box. And let's see. Caitlin asks, and we're using just first names here today. And I don't think you people can see the other people's questions, and that's privacy, that we like to keep people's last names concealed. So Caitlin asks, is there a pay scale for op-eds?
It is generally zero. You're not going to write the op-eds to make money on them. Some places will pay, but mostly this is what you are writing to get your point of view across or to advance a particular issue. You know, a lot of op-eds are created by organizations or pressure groups, let's say. In fact, there's even a term among editors called AstroTurf. That is op-eds that are meant to look like grassroots that are actually created. Sometimes people even will send you something that says, "Dear, fill in editor's name." You know, please try harder. But the fact is, because so much of this is, because the space is greatly in demand, editors don't pay for it because there's so much of it out there, and really good material that is free. So chances are you're not going to get paid for it.
But it can be a life-changing experience. This is what I can tell you. And the first time I got a commentary on NPR's All Things Considered, it changed the entire arc of my writing career. From that day forward, I could write in all of my pitch letters as someone whose voice has been heard on national public radios, All Things Considered. And every editor loves that line. They like to know that, oh, if NPR thinks she's good, I guess I better believe that. So it's yours to make the value of this piece. And this piece is meant to get you an agent, get you an editor, promote the fact that you're writing a book, promote the fact that the book is out, promote the fact that the book is for sale. This is a fantastic way for you to get your voice out in the world. Let's not lose sight of the fact, of course, that is first and foremost a fantastic way for you to be part of a national or international conversation. And who doesn't want to be that? As a writer, that's your obligation. What do? Writers react. There's something going on in the world and we react to it. You know this. You know that from having been rejected when an editor says, it's not really what we're thinking about right now. It's not what we're talking about right now. You know that the best single way to get published is to be part of a conversation that is going on and to bring something new, personal, illuminative to that conversation. So that's what the op-ed really allows you to do. So Cindy asks, can you offer suggestions on how to find these specialized digitized spaces amenable to publishing op-ed pieces?
Absolutely, absolutely. That is the Google machine.
Yep.
I think really, I would put this into two different terms. First, read in the area that you wish to publish. That is, if you are wanting to write about parenting, read parenting publications and see what they are doing, see what kind of, where you can be in the conversation. And second, just Google the kind of publication you're looking for, right?
Well, you want to identify yourself in a Google search. And I don't mean your name. I mean, who are you? So for instance, one of my clients identified herself as a mother of, she's Jewish, she's a mother of young children. She found herself a home on the website Kveller, Kveller, by Googling top 10 websites for Jewish parents, right? Boom, she got 10 websites she's never heard of before. And she started reading, and Kveller is by far and away the biggest and the best of them. So who are you? What are your interests? Women, top 10 websites, women fly fishing. Top 10 websites, women public school teachers. Whatever it is, you want to find these and look. You know, you don't want to get buried in the Huffington Post anymore. I don't even know anyone that reads the Huffington Post anymore. But you can get published there, but you can get buried there. I want the people to read your piece. So go and do your research. And again, please, I know that everybody wants to write for the New Yorker. But if you don't read the New Yorker, you have no business writing for the New Yorker. And the New Yorker now has such a huge wait list. And by the way, they don't run op-ed, so you don't want to go there. You want to write for who you read. So this begins by doing a little research. Absolutely. So the next question comes from Molly. Hi, Molly. That's Molly Phelps, our doctor, our burnout doctor. How are you? Yeah. It's so nice to see you. And you ask, are the terms guest essay and op-ed interchangeable, Or is the former more narrative and the latter more persuasive and adherent to an accepted structure?
Whoa, there is great nuance in that.
Yes.
Yes, as a matter of fact,
Yes,
I
the
think it
answer is
is true.
yes.
Yes, the answer is yes. I think that it depends upon the publication, but I think newspapers tend to be more policy oriented in op-eds, but there are opportunities for guest essays. The opinion section, the Sunday opinion section of the paper that I led had a humor column. That's one of our local columnists. She wrote a sort of tongue-in-cheek look at life, and week after week, and it's very hard, by the way, to produce humor. Week after week, she did a fine job of it, and that I think is reflective of the fact that editors increasingly are realizing that you don't draw readers only when you write about politics or about policy. And therefore, I think that it's a good idea to not limit yourself to those issues. You can write about the parameters of life. Um, I just wrote a piece I do a weekly public radio essay as well. And I just now wrote a piece about, it comes off this front page New York Times piece from yesterday saying any amount of alcohol is bad for you.
Boo. Boo, Dad, boo.
So I wrote about that, and that's not politics and policy at all. But it is about sort of how we lead our lives and what choices we make that speak to our heart, not just the circulation in our heart. So I think that that there is a bit more narrative in the term guest essay, and I would encourage you to go ahead and push the envelope a little bit if you're offering a piece, and see if you can do something with narrative to it.
Yes.
The other thing to think about in that is the writing style that you use. You don't want to be heavy-handed. You do want to be personal. You do want to bring in scene. Think of using, as you would for any good writing assignment, use all of your senses. I had a reference in a piece I wrote last week to a canister of combs in a gymnasium, and I was referring to what this gym's men's locker room offers, and I got the fact that they have individually packaged disposable toothbrushes, and I added just the phrase preloaded with minty toothpaste. And when you just add the term minty in front of toothpaste, that more activates your senses. You want, as a writer, to do what you can to activate the senses of the people who are reading. It just makes it much more engaging for them. So all of that can be a part of this. You don't want to just write about politics.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned just briefly here that you write on Substack. And one of the things we teach in the class is the fact that there are these fabulous hot newsletter platforms now where you can make a subscription-based income from your readers. And so it's another great place. We teach about what we teach across the spectrum. It's not just the New York Times op-ed pages and the digital spaces, but we also take in the newsletters now because they're very important and really a great place for those of you who have a weekly column in you, which is a huge difference between a writer who's working on a book and wants to write 3 or 4 op-eds to promote her book or get attention for her book, and those of you who really think you've got 52 columns a year in you. So big difference. All right, Mandy asks, when you have prolific ideas that often turn into blog posts, how do you parse through to prioritize the best ideas for op-eds? What are the features of the best and most needed ideas? Well, first of all, you want to use that calendar, Mandy. It's got to have a news peg. It's got we read pieces about sandals in the summer. We read Thanksgiving pieces at Thanksgiving. We read New Year's pieces at New Year's. The calendar provides an organic, absolutely indelible sense on the reader's part of why am I reading this now? Then there's all the news events that happen in the world. As Rex mentioned before, unfortunately, there will always be more school shootings in this country until we get that under control. So you write your piece now, and then when the next one comes along, you hand it in that day saying, I want to read this on the air. I want to publish this in your newspaper. So that's the best way I know to prioritize. But your best ideas are your most timely ideas. And the one,
timely and uniquely yours. That
right.
is, you can be writing, everybody knows that there's a healthcare crisis in America. One of the things that made Molly's piece so powerful was that it was a first person account of somebody who said, I can't take this anymore.
Right.
And
I won't take this anymore.
I won't.
No, it's not I
It
can't.
was
She can do
powerful.
anything, but she won't take
Yeah.
it anymore. And she had good reason to feel that way.
And I think that when you can bring the power of your personal observation and experience to something, but that it is a topic that is relevant to the people in your community at that particular moment, that's what makes it really powerful.
Yep.
That's where you would go first. So I wouldn't hesitate to write yourself a story budget. That is, give yourself, if you have a lot of ideas, go ahead and write a little précis for yourself on each one of those so that you have them ready. I've got files of manila folders full of little stuff that I've put in there that are ideas that I keep telling myself I'm going to develop one of these days, but they keep getting pushed aside by priority issues that I write about instead. So, keep your ideas intact because you'll draw on them at some point.
Right. The other best way to look at it is what's in the news. And so what's in the news are the most, I don't know, I wrote a bunch of op-eds about Alzheimer's, but one of them I remember I wrote after I read about the murder-suicide, I believe it was, in a tiny little town in upstate New York of an Alzheimer's patient and her caregiver. Oh. And I thought, okay, this should not be happening. And so I used that as my lead and I wrote the piece. So you've got a lot of reasons to be published. You need to make sure that you grab one and go with it. Karen asks, can I write about an event that happened decades ago, apartheid era violence in South Africa, or is that just not relevant enough anymore to today's climate in Black Lives Matter in the US?
I think there's a great relevance in the era of apartheid to what happened in the United States, and there are many ways that you can tie that together. And it can be in, you can look at the Day of Reckoning, you can look at the reconciliation efforts that were underway, you can look at the unique leadership that Nelson Mandela presented. Where is such leadership now? There are many elements of the experience of South Africa. I remember being there in 1979 and experiencing that. And I honestly, I draw on my limited experience in South Africa from the weeks that I spent there still occasionally and make reference to it. So I think, yes, there is relevance, and you never outgrow the material that is a part of your history. It is just being sure that you're not just saying, well, I remember when, but you're you're touching back to that while writing about what's going on now.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Absolutely. Grant asks, and I see you've got a correction here, so let's look at the first one. I've seen a lot of people going through career transition out of a job to be told to get their anger out of their system before reaching out to recruiters, people hiring, etc. Okay, and you say, and your question is, how much does this apply to those writing an op-ed? Should one get their anger out of their system before typing the first word?
No.
I don't know, Grant. I refer to it as typing with my elbows when I'm furious about something. Yep. And trust me, many of my pieces on Alzheimer's were written from such riotous fury that I'm a huge believer. If it wasn't for my fury, I wouldn't have ended up writing about it, because my mother was 49 when she got sick, and there was not a single service for her. And guess what? 40 years later, it's not much better. So I still have lots of fury. Get your fury out, Grant, and get to the keyboard.
Yeah, I think it gives passion to your writing. That's fine. And, of course, you need to end up using all of your good skills as a writer. And we talk about that in the class, how you go back over and edit and re-edit. And because the fundamental of writing is rewriting.
Yes.
And you will, by the time you have a piece ready to go, it'll be great if you still have some of that passion and anger in your voice.
Yeah, I always advise people to drink just enough caffeine right before you start to shake, and then eat a dark chocolate bar. Then start typing if you're angry. Really, it lights some fire. All right, Sadia says, I struggle with writing an effective pitch for an op-ed piece. Any tips on how to stand out for an editor to take notice of a good pitch?
I generally urge you not to pitch. I urge you to get the piece ready and submit it to the editor. I mean, you can pitch, but the fact is most editors want to see the piece. The reason that they are not uh, so amenable to your pitches is because perhaps they don't know you. Unless you are an accomplished writer well known to the editor,
Right.
they're not going to know that you can necessarily produce a piece on deadline that they want to publish that will meet their length and style requirements. Yep. So write the piece, get it in shape, and have it ready to submit when the moment is at hand for the piece to run. A pitch is possible, but I would say that the percentage of pieces in my newspaper that were developed as a result of a pitch that we published is probably in the single digits. Mm-hmm. Almost all of them came in ready to go, and we worked with the people to make them better. We had an editor who would spend time with the writer, and that would help. But generally, I don't think you need to pitch when you're in most of these cases.
Sharon asks, what are one or two critical items that you think make an op-ed stand out?
Well, we talk in the class about the different types of leads, that is the top of the story.
Right.
And I think that the most important element is being able to capture the reader's interest and imagination at the top. Beginning reporters who are taught how to cover a car accident and a homicide are taught that the first 10 words of the story need to encapsulate as much as possible what the story is, or at least grab the readers. I still count my words. I still count the number of words in my lead and try to make sure that the top of it is something that it is engaging and interesting and hopefully engages some of the senses, is visual, for example. And that will require you to write and rewrite the lead. The other thing that I would say is that you need to be sure that you're asking for the 2 or 3 things that might be the most important. I would say the other element, just to go back to something we stressed earlier, is that you need to have content that backs up your point of view. You're not just giving us your opinion. Do the research, go out and find polling data, social science research. You'd be amazed at what you can find from the comfort of your own Aeron chair. And that is that there is a lot of material out there that is available online that can really give substance to the data, to the material, and give data to your perspective. So don't hesitate. And you need to give that to the op-ed editors and producers because they have a lot of other material and they need to be sure that what you are offering them, in fact, is backed up by verifiable data.
Absolutely. Wendy says there's no need to read her comment on air, but Wendy, I agree with you. You should write that op-ed, absolutely, positively. Lindsay asks, can you write about a set of laws you feel are broken, even without a law degree? I just feel like there's not space for people to want to hear a non-expert, even though I have personal experience with the brokenness. Oh, absolutely, Lindsay. You've got expertise. So I think people forget that you have areas of expertise. As I said before, if you put a kid on a school bus, you know about the terror of putting a kid into potential harm's way. And similarly, if you don't need to be a lawyer, you need to be someone who lives within the law, which is most people in this country, right?
Yeah, right. I think that, again, we're not talking about just opinion, but if you have facts to back up the point of view that you're expressing, you're an expert, you're good. That doesn't mean you have to have a law degree. It does mean that there is a certain level of expertise that is understood in some fields. You don't want to be writing about nutrition science if you don't know anything about it. You can make people sick, you know. So be careful and thoughtful about what you're doing. But if you have expertise, if you draw on experts, you don't necessarily need to be that person with the advanced degree.
Right, absolutely. Caitlin says she just wrote a piece on her Substack. Great, congratulations for having a Substack account about being a public school parent after being raised homeschooled. would love to put it elsewhere for more eyes, but really not sure where that may go. So she wants some ideas. So I'm actually fascinated by that, because so many kids got homeschooled during COVID. More of us at least have some working knowledge of what homeschool is. It went from being this weird thing that people did who lived in inaccessible places to something that lots and lots of people did. So my advice always with writers is, when a door opens, walk through it. So first of all, what is your what's your local newspaper?
Right.
And what, start with what you've got in your own backyard.
Moreover, I think that there are publications focusing on public education that if you're writing and saying, I was homeschooled, but I now believe in public education, or if that's why your
Right.
kid is public schooled,
Right.
that is something that I think would be attractive to say a teacher's publication, to a publication of a teacher's union. It could be, again, something that your local newspaper or your local public radio station would be interested in. I would definitely go for that and see what you can find. Also, do your Google search of outlets with that cover education policy. For example, there are great not-for-profit newsrooms. The one that's best known perhaps is called Chalkbeat. That is an organization of professional journalists that cover education, but there are others, and they may have, I don't know this to be sure, but they may have a way to distribute your material. Check that out and see what other, as Marion said, do a Google search of best publications on fill in the blank of topic.
And one of the things I've noticed in the New York Times these days is, of course, I'm sure you've all noticed, is for a lot of their special sections, their education section, their weekly book review section, they now have lots of online essays on those topics that aren't appearing in print. So don't ever shy away necessarily from a national newspaper, and don't ever shy away from the online version of some of your favorite publications, because they may be a place to go.
That's right.
I was just reading a personal essay. They called it a guest essay by a guy who's an editor, who's a grammar and punctuation expert. And it was a fabulous guest essay in the New York Times associated with the book review. So do some research. I think you'll be amazed how much there is out there. Where so many places to publish. Lori asks, it sounds like op-eds are always in reaction to an event. What about op-eds as a way to create awareness? Yeah, I mean, when I wrote about Alzheimer's disease, no one had heard of Alzheimer's disease. I know that doesn't seem possible, but it was before anyone had heard of it. So I got to be part of starting a national conversation. I didn't start it, but I was part of a group of people who wanted to start a conversation about what was going to be this great healthcare crisis that's now upon us. So yeah, create awareness. Think of all the things that we're not paying attention to, that we don't know how to pay attention to. Look at this astonishing awareness that's happened in America, 2,000 years late, about the role of the indigenous populations of North America alone, right? This is something we need to be talking about. So there was no awareness among the reading public. Literally, the New York Times did not cover America's Indigenous. It's now covering America's Indigenous. It's now reviewing Indigenous authors in the book review. The Canadian press is covering the horrible story of the schools in Canada, but it's also in the newspapers covering Indigenous writers. This awareness, late though it is, absolutely is real. And you want to be part of raising our sights about things we need to know about.
Absolutely. I think I apologize for all the stubborn editors out there in advance who will be harder for you to get through to if it's not something that's on the tip of their tongues, but don't give up.
Talk them into it.
Yeah.
Talk them into it. When I pitched the Alzheimer's
Absolutely.
piece, I was 26 years old. I pitched it to an editor at the New York Times, and he said, I've never heard of it. That's what he said, because he had never heard of the disease. So I had to talk him into it. So there you go. So Barbara asks, do you prefer the op-ed over the personal essay when considering companion pieces for a book-length memoir? No, Barbara, I don't prefer them. You need to be able to write them all. You need to be able to write blog posts, op-eds, essays, long-form essays, and books to have a writing life. And all of my friends who have writing lives, some of them even include book reviews. So, you want to be able to write in every form that is available to you to have a writing life. I am dedicated to talking people out of writing that one big book that they think they should write, that begins with their great, 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 great grandfather and ends with what they had for lunch today, and instead having a writing life where you write in every form there is. It is a marvelous thing, and it's available to you, but you've got to get rid of that stubborn devotion to that one book. Wendy asks, I love the earlier question about riotous fury. I'm raging to write about it. Yep, Wendy, that's the right attitude. You got it. You got to be raging to write about it. So we're just about to the end of our time together. I've put up the URL in the chat for the class, and I hope you'll consider joining us with the class. I'm just really devoted to this form, and I think it's so misunderstood. I think people genuinely believe you have to be a former Joint Chief of Staff, and I'm here to tell you, as somebody who was writing when she was 26 for big publications, it was an honor and a glorious thing, but it began my writing career, and it's a long career that I'm very proud of, but it's got pieces. There are essays, there's radio essays, and there's op-eds, there's 4 books to date. There's lots of digital copy these days. So I really encourage you to consider this. And if you are writing a book, this is a great way to get attention on your book from an editor or an agent that are constantly scanning those pages of the small and large newspapers of the world. Christina, probably be our last question. Christina says, I have written an op-ed from my expertise as a member of the immunocompromised and chronic illness community, which is struggling with the current phase of the pandemic. Yes, they are. My local paper said that my writing and research were excellent, but my perspective didn't align with their editorial stance. Ooh, or the viewpoints of their readers. How do we writers give a voice to the voiceless when the gatekeepers don't want to listen either? Go somewhere else. Those people, that's a shame. It doesn't matter to me what your perspective is. It matters to me. If your writing and research is good, get yourself another place to publish. That is absolutely it. You don't want to work with editors who don't want to work with you.
I'm sorry. That's really contrary to my ethics, certainly as an editor, and not usual, I'd like to think.
Yes.
So go to the next community over where the next local newspaper is, or the regional newspaper that is bigger than the little one that gave you that closed-minded response.
That is a closed-minded response.
Something more. Yeah.
Wow, that's shocking. Really shocking. So thank you everybody for coming along today. It's been a joy to spend time with you. I love hearing from you, and I love doing these free webinars. We do them once a month. Next month, we're going to talk about how to run your author's business. And you have one if you have a writing life. Again, everything I teach is about getting you the writing life you deserve. You've all got stories. They're all worth telling. Just get yourself unattached from the one book concept and start writing op-eds, essays, long form essays, blog posts, and books. And you can do all of that here at the Memoir Project. We now have, as I said, 5 editors, including Rex, who's the best op-ed editor I know. He's edited my stuff for years, and we keep going. So thank you. I'm just delighted that thank you for all these lovely thanks in the chat. Be well, stay in touch, and when you write those pieces, send them to me. We will promote them and put them in the newsletter and put them up on Facebook and send them out on Twitter. It's important to me that you get your voice out in the world. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Be well, write well, and stay in touch.